David Lewis, fondly known as Fishhook, earned his nickname for a simple reason. He could always reel in a fish, no matter where he was. His skill at fishing became more than just a hobby. It was a part of his identity. Friends and family say the name suited him perfectly. Whether it was a remote lake or a quiet stream, David had a way of connecting with nature that few others did. His passion for the outdoors and his talent for fishing made him a memorable figure in the Oregon community where he lived. But David was more than just a fisherman. He was known for his helpfulness and his ability to fix almost anything. If someone needed a hand, David would be there. Those who knew him often described him as someone who could do anything and was always willing to step up. His charisma, combined with a warm and generous nature, earned him deep respect and affection. His sister, Linda Lewis Miller, remembers him with pride. She speaks of a man who was not only kind-hearted, but also carried a free-spirited energy that drew people in. He loved the peacefulness of nature, the rhythm of the water, and the quiet satisfaction of a successful catch. These simple joys reflected his character. Today, David's memory lives on through those who loved him. Though his death was tragic and remains unresolved, the family continues to cherish the person he was. They hold on to the moments of laughter, the fishing trips, and the man who always had time for others. In their hearts, David Lewis is remembered not for how he died, but for how he lived with kindness, skill, and spirit. On September 4th, 2008, fire broke out in a remote area near Lake Hyatt, Oregon. Emergency responders received reports of a structure fire and rushed to the scene. The first location they reached was a cabin situated roughly 5 miles from another property in the area. This initial fire drew the bulk of attention and resources, but it was not the only blaze that day. Second cabin David Lewis's was also burning. When responders arrived at David's property, they were met with a disturbing discovery. Inside the remains of David Lewis's cabin, firefighters and investigators found his body. The structure had been severely damaged by the flames, and the extent of destruction made immediate identification difficult. The discovery shifted the situation. From a typical fire response to the scene of a possible crime, authorities secured the area and began a detailed examination of the evidence. Subsequent forensic and police investigations revealed that David had suffered injuries prior to the fire. This crucial detail indicated that his death was not accidental. He had been killed before the fire was set, and the blaze appeared to have been intentionally started to cover up the crime. The fact that another cabin was set ablaze 5 miles away on the same day raised further concerns. Whether this was a calculated diversion or simply a disturbing coincidence remains unknown. Despite the gravity of the findings, no motive was immediately clear. There were no eyewitnesses, no known disputes, and no suspects. The remote location and the destruction caused by the fire left investigators with limited leads. The absence of concrete answers marked the beginning of a long and frustrating process for law enforcement and for David's family. What happened at that cabin remains one of the most pressing questions in the case. Before any news was delivered, Linda Lewis Miller felt something was wrong. It was not based on a phone call or a message, just a deep, inexplicable sense of unease. The feeling lingered, unsettling and persistent, though she could not name it at the time. It was a warning she would soon understand. Linda first came across the news through an online article. A report described a fire at a cabin in Oregon and mentioned that a body had been discovered inside. The victim had not yet been identified, but Linda could not shake the fear that it might be her brother. The details, location, timing, circumstances were too close to ignore. A quiet alarm went off in her heart, acting on growing concern. Linda shared the article with her husband, Greg Miller. He, too, felt the gravity of the situation and took immediate action. Greg contacted the local fire marshal, hoping for clarity. His call was not based on certainty, but it was driven by instinct and care for the man they both feared was gone. That call marked the beginning of the family's involvement in the identification process. The hours that followed were filled with anxiety and waiting. There was no confirmation yet, only the heavy silence of possibility. For Linda, those moments were clouded by the reality that her brother might have died under horrifying circumstances. The idea that the body in the cabin could be David was difficult to accept, but impossible to ignore. Though they had no answers yet, the weight of what they feared settled over the family. In the space between suspicion and confirmation, Linda and her loved ones were left with only questions, fear, the unsettling sense that their lives had just changed forever. The body discovered in the burned cabin could not be visually identified. The fire had caused such extensive damage that traditional methods were not possible. For David Lewis's family, this meant facing a difficult and painful next step. DNA testing was the only way to know for certain if the man found inside the destroyed cabin was, in fact, their brother and father, to move forward. Samples were taken from David's sister, Linda Lewis Miller, and his eldest son, Bo. It was a necessary process, but one that weighed heavily on everyone involved. For Bo, the responsibility of helping confirm the identity of his father through genetic testing was heartbreaking. It meant participating directly in a moment no child ever wants to face, the possibility that their parent is gone. The wait for test results brought little peace. Every day carried the tension of anticipation and the dread of what would be confirmed. There was no room left for hope, only the gradual acceptance of reality. For Linda, the process was both surreal and devastating. The sibling bond they had shared now came down to a DNA match. When the results returned, they confirmed what the family feared. The remains belonged to David Lewis. The loss became undeniable, and the grief already present deepened into something permanent. What had begun as a news report about an unidentified body in a fire had turned into personal tragedy. The emotional toll was immense, especially knowing that David's life had ended not just in fire, but in violence. This confirmation closed one chapter in the story, but only raised more questions about how and why David's life was taken. For his family, the mystery remained, now underscored by a painful truth. Following the confirmation of David Lewis's identity, the focus turned to finding out what had happened. It was clear from the beginning that David had suffered injuries. Prior to the fire, authorities confirmed this crucial detail, making it evident that foul play had occurred. Yet despite this, no one has ever been arrested. The case remains open, and the investigation has led to more questions than answers. Law enforcement officials pursued leads, but each one eventually turned cold. The dual arsons, the one at David's cabin and the one 5 miles away, complicated the investigation but yielded little in terms of identifying a suspect. There were no known disputes or immediate red flags in David's life, leaving detectives with a case that lacked both a clear motive and viable suspects. For David's family, this uncertainty has been a constant source of pain. Linda Lewis Miller and other close relatives have made repeated trips to Oregon and even to Alaska, hoping for some kind of progress. Their visits were motivated by love and the belief that a new detail, a new conversation, or even a change in leadership might bring forward a breakthrough. These journeys have become a part of the family's routine acts of both hope and mourning. Each return trip, however, has been met with silence. The lack of updates, the absence of developments, and the persistent unknowns weigh heavily. The years the case has stalled, leaving the family in a limbo where grief and frustration coexist. For Linda and others, the feeling that the case may never be solved is one they live with daily. Still, the family holds on to the belief that answers may come. Until then, they remain engaged, determined to keep David's story from fading. Although the investigation has hit numerous dead ends, their commitment has never wavered. They continue to ask questions, make calls, and travel long distances, all in the hope that someone, somewhere, will finally come forward with the truth. In the years since David Lewis's death, his family has found ways to keep his memory alive. Despite the painful lack of justice, with no arrests and no clear answers, they have chosen remembrance over despair. Each year, on the anniversary of David's death, his loved ones gather to honor his life. These gatherings are not marked by elaborate ceremonies, but by quiet, personal moments of reflection. Rooted in love and loss, the family selected a spot in a cemetery near a ball field area that feels peaceful and connected to the kind of life David valued. There they placed a handmade headstone, crafted with care and intention. It stands not only as a marker of where he rests, but also as a symbol of the enduring love his family carries for him. The headstone is a deeply personal tribute, created outside of formal structures, reflecting the same free-spirited nature David was known for. His three sons, Bo, Casey, and Skylar, along with extended family members, continue to cope with his absence. They navigate life with the memory of a father, a brother, and a friend who gave freely and lived with kindness. For them, these visits to his resting place are more tea. While the tragedy of David's death remains, his family has made a clear choice to remember him for how he lived, not just how he died. In their annual visits and the stories they continue to share, David's presence endures. The pain of unanswered questions lingers, but in honoring his life, the family ensures that his spirit is never forgotten. David Lewis is remembered best by those who knew him not for the tragedy that ended his life, but for the peaceful and grounded way he lived it. Near Lake Hyatt, in the calm of Oregon's wilderness, David found joy. He built his own boat carefully, patiently, so he could fish in the waters he loved. He was known for his skill, always able to reel in a catch, and it earned him the affectionate nickname Fishhook. The lake, the boat, and the simple act of casting a line into the water are memories that continue to shape how his family sees him. Linda Lewis Miller, Linda's sister, often reflects on these moments. For her, David was always free-spirited and kind, someone who found purpose and happiness in the outdoors. It is that version of her brother, the one surrounded by trees, wind, and open water, that remains closest to her heart. In remembering David this way, she preserves not just the image of who he was, but the feeling he brought into the lives of others. His legacy is not defined by the unanswered questions that still surround his death. Instead, it lives on in the stories shared by his sons, the traditions his family upholds, and the memories that echo through Oregon's landscapes. David Lewis remains a beloved father, brother, and friend. The lake may be quiet now, but for those who remember him, it still carries the presence of a man who lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy rooted in nature, kindness, and quiet strength.